Hi, my name is Nico, and in this video I'd like to talk with you about the sales channels in Shopware 6. And before we switch directly to the administration, let's take a quick look at a very good example to understand what sales channels actually are. I always use a very practical example for this. Namely, let's imagine the following. We have a classic restaurant. There's a kitchen, there are various seats, there's a waiter, and so on. So, in this case, the kitchen would naturally represent the manufacturing or production of the respective products, yes. That means we have a kitchen where dishes are prepared. In our online shop, these are of course the products. Now there's the waiter who brings the dishes from A to B, right? He brings them, for example, from the kitchen to the seats directly to the customers. The customers in this case would naturally be at the storefront, more or less, so at the web shop that I actively access via the domain as a customer later on. And the waiter in this case would be an API, so an interface between the kitchen and the customer, yes, or the respective storefront. Now imagine the following business concept. We all know classic restaurants, as just described, but imagine the waiter could go not just to one location to a seat, but to several locations. For example, one shop further. Or maybe he also has a food truck or something similar. That's exactly what Shopware does at this point. It means we can use one production or one data set of products and display it in different places. The advantage is obvious. We can create different storefronts and online shops that we tailor specifically to different customer groups, be it depending on the location, where the customer is, or also according to the target group, for example, age, gender, or B2B and B2C. The most diverse scenarios are possible there, and you can decide quite freely how you want to handle it. You could also display two completely different product lines in two different shops and manage everything from one administration. That's not a problem at all. Exactly, and we'll now take a look in detail at what the rough outline looks like and how it's intended in Shopware. So let's switch to the administration for this. Once in the administration, we already find the existing sales channels directly on the left side because there are of course already some in there by default. In my case, I named the HTML storefront content 123. The HTML storefront, what is that again? Basically, that's the web shop. So I call up content123.de and then I have my web shop there afterwards where customers can order. That's what's meant by storefront. Directly below that, we find the headless channel. What does headless mean? If we orient ourselves to the example from earlier again, then headless is basically the waiter. So the API, the so-called interface with which I can, address, make, and do various things. That means I can use a connection, for example. I could, for instance, let's take an ERP system. I could connect that. I would then need the API access. I can also find that here in this sales channel. I can also show that very briefly. If we click here, we'll find a lot of settings. I won't go into detail yet, but down here we'll find a key. Or I could create a new one and then simply use it to, move data from A to B, like a waiter, For example, I could say, hey, an order was just placed locally in my shop. Please enter it in the administration. And then that would happen. So that's what the headless channel can do. But I can also retrieve data just as well. Let's imagine, hey, waiter, when is my food actually coming? Yes, so I could also ask, hey, has an order actually been shipped yet? That's exactly what it's for. And I think this example makes it relatively clear. You can also find more detailed information in our documentation on how exactly this is configured. But a lot will be explained in a moment when we create a sales channel together. I'm just going to click on the plus symbol here and then we'll have the opportunity to do that right away. If you have any extensions in your Shopware 6 administration, you might have more options here and more things you can, map via a sales channel. By default, however, these are the ones available. So the classic storefront, my web shop. Of course, we can create as many of those as we want. Then the product comparison portals that I can connect here, we'll leave that out for today. And of course, the headless channels too. I can also create several interfaces to my administration. For example, I don't just need an ERP system, but I also have my own application that adjusts prices, for instance. That's the first thing that came to mind if I wanted to update the menu in my restaurant. And I could do that via a headless channel, of course, and then control it via two channels to keep it a bit more organized. Basically, almost everyone should be able to do the same thing if we start with the standard for now. What we're going to do now is create a classic HTML storefront, okay? We want our web shop. As I said, we want it tailored to different customer groups or localizations. And that's why we're clicking on Add Sales Channel right at the top here. Now, I can give it a name. I could say content, instead of 123, I could do 321, whatever. That's for a different customer group. And what you can see clearly here are the settings that lead to you having a completely separate web shop. Because we can say, for example, hey, I want a completely new catalog now. If you don't know what catalogs are yet, feel free to watch our video tutorials on that. Basically, these are your shop categories where the product assignments also take place. And I could now, for example, attach a completely new catalog for this web shop as well. That means we'd have a completely different navigation, a completely different footer navigation. I could select those down here, a different service navigation. And of course, very importantly, customer groups. Yes, I can select different customer groups here. In my shop, only the standard customer group is available right now, but it could be, for example, we've divided it into B2C and B2B, and here you'd already have the option to say, okay, this shop is only intended for these customers and the others are left out for now. Of course, I can also assign countries. Then, quite interesting here, the currency assignment, dollar, euro, and so on, I could do that here. That's also very interesting. For example, I might want to offer euros in my European shop, but in my American shop, I want to offer the dollar. Exactly these things can be implemented here. You can, of course, also do everything in one shop. That's also possible. But if we want to use different sales channels, as mentioned, to target specific customer groups, then that would happen right here. We also have the option here to add languages. Very fundamental setting. Okay, I want to provide the German language to my German customers and the English language to my English-speaking customers. I think that's relatively self-explanatory. Yes, now we have other things here. You might not always think of them directly, but if you go through here, you could, for example, also change things like units of measurement, right? So, for example, I want to specify something in kilograms or in grams. Do I want centimeters, millimeters, meters? Or maybe I even want to specify other things. For example, the whole thing in inches or pounds, depending on whether I'm in Europe or America again, or in whatever country, right? So, then we have the payment methods below that. Another great thing, for instance, I might want to offer a different payment option in Germany than I would in America. That can have various reasons. Maybe I also have my own payment service provider at the respective location, and with that, of course, come things like taxation. How is the taxation calculated? There's always column by column or line by line. If you want to learn more about that, you can also find it in the documentation. It's described a bit more precisely there. That's often very difficult to follow via the audio track. Exactly. Here's hreflang integration. We can add also different domains. We can also assign multiple domains to a sales channel so that, for example, content321, our new channel, is not only accessible via content321.de, but also via test.de or test2.de. So we could, of course, we have to own these domains, but we could store them here. And here again, I have an API access key for the respective sales channel. So each sales channel has its own waiter, so to speak, if we stick with the previous example. And last but not least, I can of course also set a status. I can say, is this channel active right now or is it inactive, depending on whether I have it on or off, is it available to customers at all or not. Then they won't see anything in the storefront or won't be able to access it at all. And I can of course also activate a maintenance mode. In this, I could then whitelist IPs. So you'd have to check briefly beforehand which IP you have, then you can insert it here. And if you have maintenance mode on, you're the only person who can access this sales channel. But you can also add multiple IP addresses. To do this, you always use a comma to separate one IP from the next. If you have several employees, for example, who also work on this storefront, then I could go here and save the whole thing and then my sales channel would already be created. Of course, we'd have to make many more configurations for this sales channel, but the video is just meant to show how it all works. To give you an example, your sales channel naturally needs a certain look. And for example, I only have the Shopware default theme here. This is already stored for content 123, which is the standard sales channel. I would also need a theme for my new channel, but of course I can also use one theme for several channels. As you can see, you can even use your own designs, in this way, and give your shop a completely unique look, depending on which customer group it's created for. And you can also display the respective products in the same way. I hope that this is relatively easy to understand and that it has helped you. If you have any questions, feel free to write them in the comments below and I'll try to answer them all. On that note, take care and bye-bye.